As the saying goes, you are what you eat. But nowadays, do we truly know what we are eating? In 1994, genetically modified foods, in the way that we perceive them today, hit supermarket shelves for the first time. However, in truth, humanity has been trying to modify its food for centuries. In the past, farmers have done this through the cross-pollination of plants to produce harvests with the most desirable traits. Our current methods of modification are founded on the same principles, but instead we utilize genetic engineering to isolate a gene that encodes for a desired trait. Then we add the gene to one plant cell, which can then generate a new plant. Unlike crossbreeding, however, the genes we utilize in genetic modification don't necessarily need to originate from that species of plant and can come from a wholly unrelated group of organisms. Although our past and current methods differ in methodology, our reasons for genetically modifying foods remain unchanged. We engineer our plants in pursuit of better flavor, increased crop production, and to ward off insect damage and harmful diseases. Despite their prevalence in supermarkets and the modern American diet, most people don't precisely know what GMOs are.
GMO stands for genetically modified organism, and generally in society we would say that's like it was modified by humans, because the genomes, it's a change in the genome or the DNA or the chromosomes of an organism that's been changed, but by humans.
To quell consumer fears, the U.S. government has made claims that GMOs are just as safe and nutritional as unmodified ones. In conjunction with these findings, the FDA treats GM foods in the same regard as their counterparts, and they must only meet the requirements that apply to all foods, with no extra regulations or precautions. In addition, under current policy, GM products are not required to be labeled as such, and consumers remain unaware that their food has been modified or of the contents. This brings us back to the initially posed question: with GMOs in our diet, what are we eating, and what impact does our food have on our bodies? This question is vital to the GMO debate and is one of the most integral parts of controversy. In 1992, the FDA claimed that GM foods were substantially equivalent to traditional products, which made them safe to eat, with no need for any additional safety studies. Internal memos made public revealed the FDA's position was influenced by political appointees who were under instructions from the White House to promote GMOs. And the commissioner overseeing this policy was the former attorney for Monsanto, the largest corporation involved in genetic engineering. This has led to consumer skepticism, and many people believe that despite the FDA's claims, GMOs have adverse effects. In fact, only 1/3 of consumers believe GM foods are completely safe. Independent studies have shown that by forcing genes into the DNA of plants, we could inadvertently cause bacteria and viruses that had previously never been a problem in our food supply. They also showed that genetically engineering DNA could cause collateral damage in the form of mutations throughout the plant. However, the scientific community claims otherwise.
Thousands of manuscripts, actually about 1,700 manuscripts, you can get them all, reviews of all these manuscripts, opinions by all the top scientific societies have all reached the consensus that they're in the currently marketed genetically engineered organisms that are on the market that have been commercialized. There's no serious health risks, and there's been no single case of shown like human health problem caused by a GMO.
Because of mixed reports from the scientific community and anti-GMO organizations, there's a lack of complete understanding about the impact of GM foods. The fact of the matter is, we truly have no way of knowing what the long-term implications of GM foods are for the human body. Not only is there a morality issue in any study that could directly prove a correlation between GM foods and health, but they simply haven't been around for long enough for us to know any detriments that might come to light down the road. However, 64 other countries, including the entire EU, Australia, Japan, China, and Russia, have acted towards creating special standards for GMOs. The acts of the FDA go against the data and regulations presented by many other nations who are under the belief that GM foods are inherently different from other products and that they should undergo additional safety tests before being approved for consumption. These beliefs are detailed by the Codex Alimentarius, which is the food safety standard of the UN and the world. None of the GM products in the US meet this standard because we don't require labeling of GM products. In fact, every other developed country that allows genetically engineering crops, except for the US, requires labeling. In the United States, the topic of labeling has been a major source of controversy in the past few years, predominantly because American consumers believe that they have the right to GM-free food, and part of that right is knowing whether the food they are currently eating has been modified. In fact, a New York Times survey found that 93% of Americans believe food containing GMO ingredients should be labeled to reflect such. In addition, the buying decisions that consumers make are rooted in morals, personal values, and their perceptions. If buyers cannot be informed about their decisions, this takes a significant amount of power and liberty away from them. Regardless of the safety of GMOs, many consumers and pro-labeling advocates argue that people have the right to know exactly what they are putting in their body, and that this right comes before the desires of large corporations who are only self-interested in profits. On the opposing side, large corporations believe that they shouldn't be required to label GM products. Major food companies are saying that what consumers really want is to know what pesticides and toxins their food may or may not have contacted. However, they argue that putting a label on their product saying that it contains GMOs won't tell consumers that, and instead perpetuates the idea that those products are unsafe. Large corporations strongly stand by the idea that this would be an unfair label and that these products are completely safe to consume.
Generally, the public fears GMOs and doesn't understand what they are and how they're made, and basically have an ick factor. With GMOs, a number of things. One, people don't understand it. Two, just DNA, like people know enough about DNA that changing it kind of gives them a little bit of, if they don't understand it, it's a little creepy. And also there's a lot of negative information and false information that has spread through especially social media platforms, and inside those platforms, this media, this misinformation, or nowadays we call it fake news, gets in, and it's like a mirror. It's like a house of mirrors. So people put this stuff into Facebook or Twitter and other places, and it gets inside, and it just keeps bouncing around, and it never goes away. That's a problem. So, and so many people don't understand or have the knowledge or the capability to separate fake information from good information, or bad information from high quality information.
This lack of consumer understanding of GMOs is the basis of the anti-labeling arguments, and that raises the question, do large companies have the right to shield themselves from potential consumer biases? Anti-labeling groups support their stance in a variety of ways. They cite a Cornell University study that claimed required labeling in New York would cause families to pay $500 or more a year for groceries. However, this assertion comes with a variety of unprecedented assumptions made by the researchers. Researchers based their findings on poll numbers that relayed that most Americans would be less likely to buy a product labeled genetically modified. Assuming that's true, companies would then move to produce pricier, non-GM products to stay competitive. They then assumed that neither the companies or the supermarkets would absorb the increased production cost and that consumers would solely foot the bill. However, of the 64 countries that have mandatory labeling laws, none of them have experienced a significant increase in the prices of groceries. Large corporations against mandatory labeling also cite that some products are already labeled non-GMO, so there is no need for other products to be labeled as containing genetically modified components. However, these labels are voluntary and are comparable to how products are labeled organic or all-natural. Directly addressing this controversy, the federal government has recently taken action. Food manufacturers will soon be required by law to disclose when their products contain genetically modified ingredients. However, this has not put an end to the labeling debate, and both critics and fans of labeling are unsatisfied. Looking into the future from an uncertain present, we still have many questions regarding the role GMOs will continue to play in society, and whether we will ever find a compromise that is mutually beneficial to everyone. One thing, however, is certain. The world's population is growing exponentially, and by 2050, we are predicted to expand from our current population of 7 billion to 9 billion. The amount of land we have to farm is shrinking, though, and with population growth, the UN has said we will need to double food production to feed the world. With this future ahead of us, it's apparent that for better or for worse, genetic engineering might be one of the only ways that we will be able to keep up with population growth and fight world hunger.